Dear friends, avoidants don't come back because you beg. They don't respond to long messages filled with emotion. They don't even flinch when you ask for clarity. But there are certain messages, calm, detached, unexpected, that bypass their defenses, texts that don't chase, don't plead, and yet they hit something deeper. They trigger the part of them that wonders, did I lose something rare? Have they finally moved on? Why do I feel this pull when I thought I let them go? Avoidants are wired to retreat when emotions get overwhelming, but they also carry a quiet, aching curiosity for the people who stop chasing them, especially when you stop reaching out the way they expect. In today's video, I'll walk you through 5 powerful texts that aren't about manipulation. They're about reclaiming your self-worth, your peace, and your emotional leverage. If you've ever loved an avoidant, if you've ever been ghosted or left on read, these 4 texts might just turn the silence into clarity, and maybe bring them back to the very connection they once ran from. I don't chase people who fear closeness. I honor myself by letting them go. This sentence sounds simple, but behind it lives a truth shaped by years of emotional exhaustion, silent hope, and hard realizations. When you love someone who fears emotional closeness, your love slowly turns into a performance, a test you didn't sign up for, where you keep proving that you're not a threat, that you're safe, that you're worthy of staying. They pull away, again and again, not because you did something wrong, but because intimacy feels unsafe to them. And what do? You try harder, you talk softer, you make excuses for their coldness. Maybe they're just tired, maybe they're stressed, maybe they just need space. But in trying to understand them, you begin to abandon yourself. This line, I don't chase people who fear closeness, is not about ego, it's about emotional self-respect. It means I see what you do. I stop giving when I feel invisible. I care deeply, but I won't beg to be noticed. This sentence may look simple, but for an avoidant, it lands like a quiet earthquake. Why? Because avoidants are used to people chasing, people explaining, people justifying their feelings. People justifying their feelings. People trying to prove their worth just to be seen. But this message doesn't beg, it doesn't accuse, it doesn't plead, it just draws a line. A soft but powerful boundary that says, I saw you, I cared, but I see myself too, and I refuse to disappear just to be loved. Avoidant people are often overwhelmed by closeness. They disconnect to feel safe. And while they run, they expect you to stay emotionally available, waiting, hoping, holding space. But when someone who once gave quietly suddenly stops giving, not with anger, not with drama, but with dignity, that's when the avoidant feels the shift. This message doesn't create panic, it creates pull. It doesn't scream, it whispers, and yet it echoes inside their mind louder than anything. Because now, you're not fighting for their attention, you're not chasing connection, you're letting go, and in that silence, they hear everything they tried to ignore. It makes them wonder, did I lose something rare? Is this the end of our pattern? What if they never reach out again? That's the power of this message. It doesn't play games. It doesn't manipulate. It just holds emotional truth in a way that can't be ignored. Because in the world of avoidance, consistency is terrifying, but losing the one who loved them without begging, that's unforgettable. This text shows maturity, not spite. It says, I'm not punishing you, I'm just honoring myself. And that's what makes it powerful. You're not sending it to get a reaction. You're sending it because you're done fighting to be seen. You've realized that your love doesn't have to come with self-abandonment. That's what confuses the avoidant most. You're no longer playing the game they expected. You're not reacting. You're not proving. You're not over-explaining. You're retreating with grace. And that retreat becomes the mirror they didn't ask for, but now can't unsee. This is the moment they remember you, not because you shouted, not because you begged, but because in your silence, they saw what it means to truly be strong, to walk away with self-respect, and to love without losing yourself. And for an avoidant, that kind of love haunts them. They may not reply today, they may not come back tomorrow, but they never forget it. You don't have to come back. I already left. This sentence sounds like closure, but it holds a quiet storm. It's not loud, it doesn't scream, accuse, or beg. It simply draws a line, Because sometimes the deepest heartbreak doesn't happen when someone leaves you, it happens when you're still standing beside them, but they stopped showing up a long time ago. You kept reaching out, in soft ways, in strong ways, through understanding, through silence, through second chances. You tried to hold a connection that felt like it was slipping through your fingers, one unspoken avoidance at a time. And yet, they never noticed your slow fading. Or maybe they did, but pretended not to. Avoidants don't fear you, they fear what you represent: closeness, emotional truth, accountability, vulnerability. And so they run, but what they don't expect is that one day you'll stop following. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. You don't have to come back. I already left. It's the moment you no longer carry hope like a burden. You don't send long texts anymore. You don't wait for their maybe later or not now. You stop checking your phone. You stop rehearsing what you'll say when they return. Because something in you clicked, you finally understood that your love was not the problem, it was their inability to receive it, and you no longer want to bleed just to prove you can feel. This sentence is not revenge, it's release. It means I stayed longer than I should have, and I forgive myself for that. But I won't stay a moment more. It's not about shutting doors, it's about walking through the one that leads back to yourself. Avoidants often come back when they feel you slipping. They test the waters just to see if you're still there. But this time, you're not, because you've already left emotionally, and that shift, that emotional unavailability, is something they don't know how to handle. You see, they were always prepared for you to chase, to explain, to fight for the connection. But when the silence is yours, not because you're wounded, but because you're healed, that's when they feel the loss. You don't have to come back, because now their return doesn't define your worth. I already left, because you finally chose your own peace over their pattern. And that, more than anything else, haunts the avoidant. They don't forget the one who walked away with love, with grace, with no drama, only the quiet decision to stop holding what was never held back. Because the ones who stop waiting become the ones who are remembered. Thanks to you, I finally met myself. This sentence might sound like closure, but it's actually the beginning of something powerful, because sometimes it takes losing someone to find the parts of yourself you forgot trying to keep them. See, loving an avoidant doesn't just hurt because they're distant, it hurts because they invite you close, only to vanish again. They give just enough to keep your hope alive, but not enough to help you feel safe, and in that push-pull, you begin to shrink. You speak more gently. You apologize for things you didn't do. You become more understanding than anyone has ever been with you, yet feel the most unseen you've ever felt. You think you're choosing love, but slowly, you're abandoning yourself, until one day, it shifts, not in an explosion, but in a quiet internal whisper that says, "This isn't love if I can't recognize myself in it anymore." And so you stop, not to punish them, but to meet the version of you that was buried beneath compromise. That's when the healing begins. The version of you that no longer waits for the unread messages, that doesn't rehearse what to say if they return, that doesn't keep justifying emotional starvation in the name of trauma bonding. Thanks to their absence, you finally remembered your own presence. Thanks to the confusion, you found clarity about what you actually need. Thanks to the silence, you heard your own voice again. And in that rediscovery, you didn't become bitter, you became whole. You started drawing boundaries. You stopped over-explaining. You realized that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. Avoidants don't forget people like you, not because you begged, not because you exploded, but because you simply let go with grace. They expected you to stay stuck in the loop, but you didn't. You broke the pattern. And in doing so, you broke the version of you that accepted less just to feel something. Now you walk differently, not harder, but clearer, and maybe they'll come back. Maybe they'll test the waters again, but it won't matter the same way it once did, because now you know, you don't need closure from them when you've given it to yourself. So yes, thanks to them and everything they didn't give, you met the strongest version of you. And this time, you're not afraid to keep them out, to keep yourself in. So if you've sent the long messages, if you've begged to be seen, to be heard, to be chosen, and still felt like you were fading in the background, this is your turning point. These texts are not about punishment. They're about power, quiet, graceful, emotional power. They're about drawing a line where your worth no longer bleeds for someone's attention, because you've loved deeply. You've stayed longer than you should have, and now you're allowed to leave differently. Avoidants don't forget the one who stopped chasing. They don't forget the one who set a boundary, calmly, without slamming the door, but without holding it open, either. They remember the silence that wasn't empty, but full of strength. They remember the peace you chose over their confusion, and maybe that's exactly what they needed to feel, not to hurt them, but to finally see. Because the truth is, the person who walks away with self-respect becomes unforgettable to the one who never expected them to stop giving. So if you're still holding on, ask yourself this: am I staying because they love me, or because I'm afraid they'll forget me? And then remember, real love doesn't make you feel invisible, and real healing begins when you finally stop chasing the person who never truly saw you. Let go, not with anger, but with clarity, because that's when they finally feel your absence, and that's when you finally find yourself.